So recently I had a somewhat spicy interaction and it got me thinking. And if you did see this interaction or you know where to find it, I'm going to ask that you don't go start anything with this guy, please and thank you. It would accomplish absolutely nothing but creating more conflict, which is not what we do here. But we are going to discuss it. Hi squad, dog bless, let's talk about feelings. The interaction I mentioned is a guy who responded defensively to one of my videos. When I questioned him about his angle of approach, why he was coming out of the gates the way he did, what I got was a convoluted dance of avoidance. He both refused to engage with emotional awareness and acted like me asking about his feelings was an attack. And he did this while insisting his position was one of logic and reason, absent any emotional motivation whatsoever. And this is something that I've run into a lot while talking about the things that I talk about. Western men in particular tend to fall into this particular trap thanks to patriarchal training. We have been taught that emotionality and manliness are negatively correlated. Once again, when this gets discussed, it tends to be through the lens of misogyny, which makes a lot of sense. Deeming emotion feminine and therefore lesser because anything associated with women is inherently inferior. But there's a lot more at play here than just only women have feelings and women are bad. The chronic emotional impairment of boys and men under patriarchy is as much about male oppression as it is about female oppression. Because by letting men develop emotional intelligence and outlets outside of anger, you run the risk of creating a mentally healthy population. And that makes for bad soldiers and bad workers. It is much easier to convince people to grind themselves into oblivion or go off to war if you've kept them on a consistent diet of competition and standards of manliness that are achievable only through violence. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's kind of the gist. All of this exists alongside the construct that manhood necessitates self-assuredness and confidence, that a real man is a competent man. Which means that when a man who has bought into this thinking wholesale is asked to examine his emotions, he has been confronted with a skill deficit, something he doesn't know how to do, a lack of competence, and therefore a threat to his manhood. So we have been taught compensatory language to mask this deficit. Women have feelings, but men have reason, which means even if you can't explain your feelings, you can at least explain them away. One of the most insidious ways that men have been separated from our feelings is with this false dichotomy of emotionality and rationality. This, of course, goes back to that false gendering of traits that we already mentioned. Emotion is feminine, logic is masculine, but this too runs deeper. Because by believing that rationality and emotion are mutually exclusive, we lose the ability to be rational about our emotions. We think our emotions are themselves reason, and therefore that our subjective experiences are objective, which at best is deeply arrogant, but at worst, it's hard to wrangle a beast that you refuse to even look at. Let me explain further. Logic is a reasoning tool, and a very useful one, but without emotional awareness, you are actually less likely to apply it properly. Because how are you supposed to filter out potential biases that you don't even know how to pinpoint? How can you claim to have your feelings in check when you don't even have the language to name them? That's like trying to muffle frequencies that you don't have the tech to properly hear. Being aware of the inevitable filter of your own perception is essential to a better understanding of the world around you. When we're defensive, somebody reaching out can look like an attack. When we're lonely, someone not giving us attention can look like neglect. When we're sad, the world around us often looks hopeless. And when we're angry, we are more primed to place blame than we are to seek mutual understanding. By calling our feelings rationality, by removing our humanity from our viewpoint, the world appears to objectively be what we are feeling in a given moment. And it's not. Sometimes things are good, sometimes things are bad. But they are always more complicated and nuanced than what we are personally able to see. We need to know how to identify our feelings, both for a more realistic understanding of the world around us and to know how to cultivate their counterparts. If you don't know how to recognize when you're feeling defensive, lonely, sad, or combative, how can you pursue security, connection, happiness, and peace? Because, gentlemen, there are two types of men in this world. Those with a full spectrum of human emotion who are aware of it, and those with a full spectrum of human emotion who are unaware of it. Repression and relabeling do not make your feelings go away. They just make you worse at handling them because you never develop the skills to do so. Every single social action that you take is in some part motivated by your feelings. They are integral to who we are. They inform our motives, our relationships, and our self-concepts. You can't just turn them off or call them something else. You can repress them, you can ignore them, but that's just covering your eyes so that you don't see the oncoming car. Yet so many men I've encountered have convinced themselves that they can act separate from their emotions, and these tend to be the very same guys who even the slightest little bit of pushback totally sets them off. And when this happens, rather than engaging with their own fallibility, they just label their emotions facts and logic, because that's how men make sense of things, right? Right now, there's probably a fair bit of variation in those of you listening. Maybe you feel understanding. Maybe you feel defensive. Maybe you're just bored. I don't know. I just work here. But regardless, you are feeling something. So what is it? Where do you think it's coming from? And is it helping you? The guys most intent on arguing with me when I nudge them on their motivations almost always clam up, and I can't say for sure why that is, even if I have my suspicions. Instead, I would like to center the men who, when prompted, actually check themselves and don't run away, but instead take the opportunity to reflect, because there's plenty of that too. Arguably a lot more. Given the space to explore their feelings, lots of men do just that. Often there is mistrust initially, which is entirely fair, because a lot of them anticipate mockery, if not simply for having feelings, then for not having the language to talk about them. I will never forget one interaction in particular that I had on Twitter of all places where I asked cis men how they're doing, just generally. Most replies were warm and friendly and honest, but one guy in particular got so mad at me for checking in. He cussed me out and everything. And my monkey brain was so fucking ready to fight. Because this stranger had come at me with his fists up for no reason, as far as I could tell. And I caught that. I took a breath, and instead of reacting, I asked him what was up and why he had responded that way. And do you know what happened? Buddy came back and apologized. He said that he thought that I was asking from a place of mockery, which itself is a really sad commentary on the current attitude towards men's emotions. I told him no problem. His reaction made a lot of sense in that case, and we carried on from there and had a really friendly interaction. Because what could have become conflict born out of misunderstanding had the opportunity to become a meaningful exchange. But we both had to take that moment of introspection first, to acknowledge how the situation made us feel, and whether or not that feeling was an accurate reflection of what had happened. These moments can be really tough to navigate because both people are building something that isn't widely modeled. That is mutual care, communication, and understanding between men. What it looks like to share vulnerability and walk away better than we were before. Something muscle fibers got to break down to rebuild stronger. When I talk to men who react defensively to being prompted on emotional awareness, it's because something in our interaction has made them feel threatened. And this illustrates why both reason and emotion are essential for healthy, effective communication. If you are asking someone about their emotional state, you have to make sure that you are in a good place to hear it, to call on your reasoning skills and make sense of it when it is given honestly. And to both the person questioning and the person responding, if you don't know how to examine your reaction, how to locate and name its source, can you honestly claim that you have a handle on it? If being asked about your feelings triggers your fight or flight, and yes, refusing to engage and insisting you're just being logical is exactly that, why? I think there are a lot of different right answers to this question, and I would love to hear yours if you feel like sharing in the comments. But here's mine. A lot of guys don't get to practice just not knowing stuff and being okay with that. Often it's just about their pride, but I think people who aren't men have a tendency to not consider the pressures of patriarchal manhood here. For example, there's a readiness to complain about mansplaining without considering the fact that it's not just straight up misogyny. There's definitely misogyny woven into it, don't get me wrong. But it also comes from the teaching that being a real man under patriarchy means always having an answer, always taking the lead, and never showing weakness, like not understanding something. It makes it very hard to learn things when you're pressured to hide the fact that you don't already know them. Kinda leaves dudes in a bind. Especially when they have a tendency to be mocked for not already having those skills by people who have had the space to develop them. And I'm not talking about weaponized incompetence, so please do not dive into the comments with your whataboutisms because I am speaking in good faith about people trying in good faith and would appreciate a good faith interpretation. But this brings me to the actionable segment of this discussion, and again, I am not a psychologist or any kind of expert outside of the gym. I am just one guy who is sharing what has worked for me and what I have been lucky enough to learn from other people. Learn to name your feelings, even if you are not yet ready to share them. Being understood by others comes a lot more easily if you develop an understanding of yourself first. Practicing emotional awareness is very much an internal thing. Name your feelings. Sit with them. Ask yourself where they might be coming from. And work on accepting the fact that no matter what you do, they are going to affect how you interact with the world and interpret information. This is not a bad thing. It's just human. The key to unlocking the stoicism that so many emotionally repressed men claim to have is by accepting and acknowledging the emotions that you are letting go of in the first place. Now, none of this is to say that other people don't also hold responsibility here. Communication is a two-way street, and obviously it's not all just a matter of personal interpretation. The things we say to each other matter. Words have meaning. But at the most bare bones, you can never truly possess what someone said, only what you heard. And the more practiced you are at recognizing internal interference, the more accurate your interpretation is going to be. Something a little more direct you can do is simply reframing how you approach conversations. When talking with others, I've personally found it really helpful to first ask myself what I can learn from them before I ask myself what I can teach them. Not only does this give you a break from the competence performance, it also jumps right to the learning portion without first having to expose your lack of knowledge if you're not quite ready to do that. This lays really good foundations for other people empathizing with you in turn, because people are much better listeners when they themselves feel heard. Because the end goal is understanding, not simply being understood. So if you want to hone emotional awareness and control, one of the best ways that you can do that is by not always prioritizing yourself and what you're trying to communicate in conversations. Instead, try to prioritize a better understanding of the people you're communicating with. Even if you don't change your mind, you will strengthen your perspective. At the end of the day, acting like our feelings don't matter or are secondary to other things is, quite frankly, silly. What are each of us working toward if not happiness and a sense of fulfillment? Of just feeling better. And you gotta know your baseline if you want to get there. That's my 2 cents on that. Take it or leave it, but even if you disagree, I hope you at least took a second to sincerely try and understand where I'm coming from. Because I don't want to just be correct, and I don't want to just prove other people wrong. I asked myself about that a while back, and honestly, dunking on others just makes me feel really gross. The satisfaction of a genuine connection and mutual understanding is a lot more fulfilling and lasting than the satisfaction of shaming someone, even if they deserved it. All I want is for folks who watch my content to walk away feeling better than they did when they arrived. There is a little post-credits clarification that you're welcome to stick around for if you would like, but that is mostly it from me for now. If you liked the video, like the video, and if you found it helpful, please share. If you like me and what I do, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Only if you are financially secure. Please take care of yourself first. But most importantly, please be kind to yourselves and each other. I will see you next time. And as always, thanks for watching. So I didn't talk about anger in this video, and I didn't talk about anger for 2 very important reasons. The first is that I had initially included it, but realized that it's an incredibly complex topic, and I would both like to take more time and bring in collaborators. The second is that we have interactive relationships with the narratives we tell ourselves and each other, and I do not want to keep telling the story of male rage. I think that there is a time and place for that, but only when it can be given its due diligence. Men are so much more than our anger. We have so much more to express, and if we are building a system of healthy emotional expression, we should not be practicing with feelings that can so easily become destructive. In every martial art I've studied, weapons training doesn't start until you have first mastered your stances. You don't just put a sword in the hands of somebody who hasn't even found their footing. And I think that our focus on male rage isn't conducive to healthy growth. We'll get to it soon enough.